Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Community Services Committee for Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. Il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non cédé de la
The city of
nation
Ottawa is built on an unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia.
We do have regrets from Councillor Troster, but I will have our committee coordinator call the roll.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Carr. Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Present.
Conseillère Plante.
Ici.
Councillor Troster. Vice Chair Bradley.
Here.
Chair Dudas.
Ici.
You have quorum, Chair.
Merci, Eric. We have no declarations of interest. We have confirmation of the minutes for Tuesday, June 24th, 2025. Is this item carried? Thank you. We have two responses to inquiries. We have 4.1 regarding extreme heat and 4.2 partnerships with local faith communities. No one is asked to lift these items, so are these items received? Received. Now, I understand that Councillor Plante is requesting that her two items be considered at the outset of the meeting. I'm willing to accommodate this, so we will start with items 8.1 and 8.2 on the agenda, and then come back to 5.1 and 6.1. So we'll start with 8.1, which is regarding renaming Edmund Park to Mary Papatisi.
Mary Papazzi.
Thank you very much, Councillor Plante. Appreciate it. I do know we have a delegation, so we'll start with our delegation, who is Chris Greenshields from the Vanier Community Association. Chris, are you with us online? Mr. Greenshields, are you there?
Yes, I've just been raised up. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Chris Greenshields. I'm the president of the Vanier Community Association. I'm pleased on behalf of the VCA to reaffirm our support to rename Vanier's Aymon Park in memory of Mary Papazzi, as indicated in our letter to city staff last April, and to support the motion to this end before this committee. As members of the committee are aware, Vanier has a large Inuit population, along with other First Nations and Métis residents. There are a number of key Inuit institutions in Vanier, the Inuktitut Family Center, the Health Clinic, and more recently, the Tungus Suvingat Inuit has expanded its presence close to Aymon Park. St. Margaret's Anglican Church, also nearby, has an Inuit congregation and minister. It is long time past that recognition in the form of naming a city park is made to reflect Vanier's Inuit population. Mary Papazzi lived close to Aymon Park and disappeared in 2017. Her tragic death was discovered in 2023 in the building in which she had lived. My wife and I were privileged on the VCA's behalf to attend the service in her memory. We learned much of her community engagement, her sense of humor, and how much she was loved by her family. She was a member of the group of Aymon Park neighbors who sought to make this park a better place. These neighbors support the renaming in her memory, also as part of the healing process in our community. The epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women is a tragedy in Canada and in Vanier. Last May, on the occasion of Red Dress Day, the Vanier neighborhood commemorated the day, thanks to financial support also from the City of Ottawa. The list of names of women lost in the community was read out on that occasion. The list is too long. In 2021, the National Action Plan for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls called for culturally appropriate spaces for victims, their families, survivors, and descendants, as both a reminder and a commemoration of those who will never come home. This park in Mary's memory could become such a place. To this end, the VCA also supports the motion's details, including provision of a new sign. The current one is spelt wrong and in bad shape, perhaps located closer to the corner as part of the improvement of the public realm. The VCA's beautification committee, which adopted the park, is happy to help to support the AMO Neighborhood Watch in this regard. Thank you. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Griggshields. Does anyone have any questions for the delegation? No, seeing none. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. I'm assuming that Councillor Plante wanted to take a moment to say a word, but before she does, and I'm making that assumption, but she hasn't put her hand up, so if she wishes to, she's more than welcome. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, so Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our colleague, Councillor Plante, for bringing this motion forward. I will be supporting it. I just wanted to ask staff, given the connection with the Inuit community, large Inuit community in Vanier and Ottawa, as well as that we are on the Algonquin territory, are there opportunities for the park sign to be not only in English and French, but in Inuit and or Algonquin?
Chair, we're happy to work with the councillor on that. It's been done in other places, and certainly it's an approach that we can take for a sign like this.
Okay, I just wanted to raise that today, and perhaps Councillor Plante, you've heard my inquiry and take that under advisement. My other only question, Madam Chair, is on item 4. It says that any costs for the installation of the plaque come from eligible sources. Should the motion identify where this is, how this is being paid for?
Can I answer that?
You're welcome to. I know staff is also prepared to answer. Maybe
Well, no, I'll just add a quick, so we, in our consultation with the circle that Councillor Bradley kindly facilitated, there was also a recognition that the Inuit community may want to do some of their own commemoration, maybe do like a statue or some sort of a national recognition for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We have not gone down that road yet. We were just focused on the naming of the park. And just to answer your previous question, the naming of the Annie Puluguk Park in Sandy Hill is featured in French, English, and Inuktitut. So it has been done before. We are happy to do it again, but we just wanted to make sure that we consult with the Inuit community as to how they see this going forward, because really the park is in dedication to them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington, does that answer your question? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councillor Plante, did you want to say a word or two?
No, I just wanted to again thank Councillor Bradley for facilitating the session we had with the circle a couple months ago. It was really informative. And of course, I do want to thank the Inuit community and Mary's family. That was very helpful throughout this process. She really was loved in the community, and we are excited to have a little space dedicated to her. Merci beaucoup, Chair.
Merci, Councillor. So is this item carried? Carried. Thank you. We're now moving to item 8.2. It's a motion. It came as a notice of motion at the last committee meeting, also from Councillor Plante, responses to encampments. We do have 4 delegations, so we'll start with them first. Our first delegation is Lauren Richardson. Welcome, Mr. Richardson. You have 5 minutes, and you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to speak to the motion And I'd also like to thank the staff who did the work and drafted the report. By way of introduction, I've been a resident of Ottawa at 160 George Street since 2001, and I'm currently the Director of Safety and Security for the Carleton Condominium Corporation 375, located at 160 George Street. I'm here today to delegate in support of this motion. I would be interested in learning more about the outcomes of the encampment responses. It is acknowledged that homeless encampments represent a complex human rights issue stemming from a lack of affordable housing, support services, and safe spaces. However, individuals in and around these encampments make it an unsafe area for the residents of 160 George Street. Individuals in the homeless encampments create public health and safety problems with the garbage and human waste they leave on the streets and private property. Tents and other structures block sidewalks for other uses, and there is significant use of illegal drugs, which result in the amplification and perpetuation of criminal activity. While activities of some homeless persons are a significant issue in the Byron Market area, and specifically along George Street, between Dalhousie and Cumberland Streets, the problem involves more than the homeless persons who have tents or other structures. Like those living on the streets with tents, those living rough on the streets without tents are also creating these same public health and safety problems. And people lying on the sidewalk along with their bikes and belongings are also blocking the sidewalk. Going forward, the city's approach to homelessness encampments needs to expand to have an effective and timely escalatory response element that addresses recurring encampments. The approach should also recognize three broad groups of individuals. First, homeless persons who are seeking help. The goal to help people access safer housing options is supported. Second, persons who are not seeking help to find safer housing options. These individuals want to meet with their friends, get high on drugs, and have a good time. In this case, on the sidewalk along George Street. And third, criminal elements, especially those selling drugs, both to the homeless as well as to other customers who know that these encampments have heroin and fentanyl available for sale. As you discuss the reports and consider next steps, I offer 4 points. First, having consistency in the advice provided to citizens on how to make a report to homeless activities, whether by phone or on the internet. Advice provided to me on September 18th by the Ottawa Police Service was to call bylaw enforcement for homeless persons blocking the sidewalk. While on September 19th, bylaw enforcement advised me that homeless persons blocking the sidewalk I should contact the non-emergency police number. Second, expanding the 311 website to include the reporting of homeless camps. That is, those locations with homeless squatters that do not have tents or other structures. Third, enhancing the transparency of homeless issues by making data available on the location, size, and nature of the issue. This would include reports concerning homeless encampments or camps, the number of individuals, as well as an indication of the sidewalk being blocked. And fourth, recognition that the concerns of residents in the development and the updating of plans on these responses should be done as well. In conclusion, as I wrap up, I hope you will agree that vulnerable residents of 160 George Street should not fear simply walking on the sidewalk along George Street because of the lawless activities of squatters who have taken over the sidewalk. Neither should the residents of 160 George be expected to step over the people on the sidewalk who are shooting up heroin or smoking fentanyl, or being threatened by these people who are high on such drugs. Finally, the city should not allow the obstruction of public sidewalks by groups of people or their garbage for weeks on end. I thank you for your attention, and this concludes my statement.
Thank you very much for being here, sir. I'm looking around. I don't see that there's any questions for you. Thank you very much for your delegation.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Marie Laurier. I believe, Marie, you are here in person. Well, thank you very much for being here this morning. You have 5 minutes and you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I live at 160 George Street in the St. George. And thank you very much for the invitation to provide the committee members an example of a lived experience as a resident at the St. George. I invite everybody here in this room to walk in my shoes, to imagine having the fear, the apprehension, facing a life-threatening and dangerous experience, which happened to me on Sunday, August the 31st at 1:15 p.m. I was coming home from having brunch in the market, and I'm a handicapped person, as you've noticed, and the walker is an essential tool for my safety. Approaching the gates of Waller Mall, I found the sidewalk completely obstructed with individuals using crack pipes, other warming liquid in spoons, and they contained lumps of whitish fluid. Other people were dancing, and some were in stupor, or they were stretched out from the gates of our property right into the parking area. On the ground, it was littered with discarded food, clothes, suitcases, blankets, refuse, blood stains, feces, and there were wet areas which I presume could have been water or urine. There was absolutely, absolutely nowhere for me to pass. I just was stopped in my track. So momentarily, I remembered an incident that happened to me 2 years ago when I was attacked by a person who obviously was on drugs at the point of an umbrella. And that was 100 feet from me. It's a really awful moment. Can you see how I felt at that moment? I mean, it's unconscionable. And so imagine if I had pulled out my phone to call 311 or 911 or maybe the non-emergency police number. Just the fact of taking my phone out, it would be threatening to some of those people because, and what could have happened to me? I could have been really seriously assaulted or injured. So what I did, quietly, slowly, I said, please let me pass. And I waited, and I waited. Please let me pass. This is very demeaning. It's absolutely a loss of one's dignity. It's traumatic. While some of these individuals eventually one of the persons in the group asked somebody else to pull one of the persons away, just enough for me to squeeze my walker by. Now, while some of these individuals on the sidewalk are homeless, it's their action, not the concept of homelessness, which really has to be addressed. Large groups of people or individuals, in many cases more than 12, under the influence of drugs and other substances, just are obstructing the sidewalk. On weekends, there are vagrants and squatters and other individuals who congregate. And that is without impunity because on the weekends, there's less services or less people available. And the only response that one can get from bylaw is when there are a number of people who call in or report on the same issue on the same date, and it's only the accumulation of numbers that gets a reaction, and the reaction time is very, very long. I certainly feel that this is not the proper way to get a response when you are in situations like that. I also ask for greater transparency on encampment responses in order to better understand what is being done or what is not being done, particularly along the St. George and George Street and other areas of the city. In closing, I want to thank the Councillor's Office for their support, their advocacy in finding a solution to these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie, for being here. I don't see any questions for you, but thank you for sharing your personal experience with us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Our next delegation is Calla Barnett. I'm not sure that she's present, and I'm not seeing her online. So following Calla, we now have Anya Fraser, who is virtual.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, My name's Anya Fraser. I am a mother living in Ward 12. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to this committee about the City of Ottawa's poor response time for dealing with encampments and suggestions for what you can do about that. I want to start by telling you about the Loblaws encampment saga. On March 21st, 2025, my neighbor first reported an encampment on Rideau Street between Loblaws and the library. Over the next few days, other people also reported that encampment. This encampment was especially problematic because it was on a busy thoroughfare, and the person living there had a dog that barked and lunged at people, which scared many trying to walk by. During the day, she used the washroom at the library, but the rest of the time she was relieving herself on nearby private property, which those property owners had to clean up for the duration of her encampment. My neighbor followed up with the City of Ottawa about her first complaint on March 27th, and was told that outreach team was on the case, but they can't provide any timelines for when it will be cleared. When other neighbors followed up, we got similarly vague responses. Ultimately, the encampment stayed there until April 8th. It took the city over 19 days to clear this encampment. Over that time, the encampment expanded from 1 to 2 tents. We even saw Salvation Army Outreach Services, who are paid for by the city, help that lady install a tarp. For over 2 weeks, at least one business and a dozen residents filed multiple complaints and got the brush off from your department. On April 14th, the woman and her vicious dog had relocated their encampment to an even worse location, directly across the street from York Street Public School. Now, like most people in Ottawa, I am sympathetic to people who are living rough. However, our municipal government, and the CSC department in particular, need to balance their responsibility to care for people with lived and living experiences with their responsibility to keep housed residents safe. Therefore, your department needs to set reasonable service standards for how many days they will take to help people living in encampments before they clear it. Speaking with my neighbors, we support the municipal government trying to reach out to people living in encampments to find alternative shelter for them and provide them with other necessary supports they might need as a first step. However, you cannot allow this outreach stage to continue indefinitely. When you do that, these encampments expand, the garbage and behavioral issues worsen, and residents become frustrated and scared, especially those of us with children. The city needs to set reasonable service standards for how long they will try to do outreach. 5 business days should be sufficient as a regular service standard. After that period, the city needs to clear that encampment. Given that this is a recurring issue, the CSC department needs to work with OPS and waste management to develop an efficient system for clearing encampments. You can't just keep brushing off residents by playing hot potato when this is a well-established problem. The CSC department also needs to develop a policy for triaging emergency cases. These are cases that cannot wait 5 days to do outreach. They need to be cleared ASAP. First, exceptional weather. When there are extreme cold or heat warnings in effect, the CSC department must take responsibility for getting people living in encampments into warming or cooling shelters immediately. You do not have time to ask the Salvation Army outreach team to swing by the next day or the day after. 2, prohibited areas. The City of Ottawa needs to pass a bylaw prohibiting encampments within 100 meters of spaces meant for children, like schools, daycares, programs, and where there are obvious safety concerns, like traffic medians, similar to what the City of Winnipeg just passed. This is important because the number of times that I have had to report and follow up on encampments in playgrounds or next to daycares is unacceptable. Our children are the most vulnerable people in our community. In conclusion, the CSC department needs to develop reasonable service standard for how long they will try to do outreach. Second, you also need to work with OPS and waste management to develop an efficient system for clearing encampments once that service standard has been met. Finally, you need to understand that certain encampments need to be cleared ASAP. So you need to take the lead on developing measures for how the city will triage and deal with those emergency cases. I would strongly encourage you to consider copying Winnipeg's new bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya. I'm looking to see if anyone has any questions for you. Seeing none, I appreciate you being here today and for your delegation.
Thank you.
We do have Kala Barnett now online. So we'll move to Kala as our next delegation.
Good morning. They found me. So I'm happy to be here to delegate in support of Councillor Plant's motion. My name's Kala Barnett. I'm both a parent and a disabled person. So I have great empathy for all of the delegates today and their experiences. I'm speaking as a resident of Ward 12, as someone who's been working closely with neighbors, service providers, city officials, everyone to address the mounting challenges, you all know me, caused by encampments and the overconcentration of services in the downtown core. I am strongly supporting this motion, and allow me to explain why. In 2020, City Council declared an affordable housing and homelessness emergency. 5 years later, that emergency is visible in every park, alley, and schoolyard of our neighborhoods. This is across the city. It is even more visible on the sidewalks and the streets of Ward 12. Encampments have proliferated because people are not getting the housing, treatment, and mental health supports that they need. The emergency shelters are unsafe. But addressing encampments in parks is much different from addressing encampments on a sidewalk in the downtown core. We live with these encampments, as you've heard, sometimes for weeks on end. Lauren and Maria have shared their experience, as has Anya, but those are only some of the experiences. I'm sure if Chris had delegated on this, he'd tell you about the one that was on Montreal Road over Christmas. As a result of the overconcentration of services in Ward 12, residents report constant aggression and verbal assaults, needles on playgrounds, and human waste on their doorsteps. Families have pulled their children out of local daycares. Refugees and newcomers who fled war zones are now living surrounded by open drug and sex trafficking and overdoses. People in recovery are re-traumatized daily, and people who use drugs are left unsafe and unprotected. We are not afraid of our unhoused neighbors. We are afraid of the lack of coordinated, compassionate, and effective response. Concentration is not compassion. Urban encampments are not simply tents in a park. Often in urban areas, the tents are erected by people who are housed to conceal drug trafficking, sexual violence, and exploitation. People are coerced into trading their medications or bodies just to survive. And we see this, we witness it, but we can't prove it because taking a video puts us at risk. At the same time, we experience additional secondary trauma, children stepping on discarded needles, residents intervening in overdoses without training, and neighbors calling 911, 311 only to be dismissed or given the runaround, as we've heard. Sandy Hill, Lower Town, and the Byward Market host the highest concentration of shelters, safe injection sites, safe supply clinics, and day programs of anywhere in Canada. Service providers and city officials have justified this by repeating the idea that people who use drugs will not travel more than 500 meters to access services. That claim relies on outdated, flawed evidence. It is false. But it has entrenched a containment strategy that harms everyone: residents, businesses, people in recovery, people who are unhoused, and people who use drugs. Instead of distributing services equitably across Ottawa, the city continues to cluster them in our neighborhoods, creating hotspots of violence, disorder, and despair. Councillor Plant's motion does not ask us to criminalize poverty or vilify people who use drugs. It asks us for something very basic: transparency, data, and triage. We need to know how encampments are being managed across wards, not just downtown. We need timelines and accountability from the Unsheltered Task Force and the CSSD. And we need to distinguish between encampments that are primarily shelter from those that are hubs of criminal activity. Most importantly, we need to stop pretending that one neighborhood can carry this burden for the entire city. Equity demands that services, supports, and responsibilities be shared. Concentration is not compassion. True compassion is equity. True compassion is balance. And we all deserve it. People without housing, people who use drugs, families raising children, refugees rebuilding their lives, seniors walking to the grocery store. Everyone who calls Ottawa home. Right now, our systems are failing us. The result is fear, trauma, and preventable harm. Supporting this motion is a necessary step to acknowledging the scale of this crisis, of this emergency, and beginning to repair trust that has fallen away. I urge you to support this motion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kala. I'm looking to see if we have any questions. Seeing none, we very much appreciate your delegation today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So now I will open it up to any questions to staff. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up and I'm not seeing. Oh, okay. So Councillor Carr, let's just give a moment. We'll let staff. Oh, Claire's set up. Sorry, I'm blind as it. We'll just let staff get settled for a second. Hold on. Okay, wonderful. Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to know, first of all, if staff support the motion that's on the table?
Yes, we can provide everything that was in the motion with the exception of by ward data. That's not how we collect the data, but the rest of it, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I was just wondering, in light of some of the information and stories that we heard from the delegates, I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit about what the city's approach to encampments is. And I know, was it last year or the year before, that the Federal Housing Advocate actually produced a paper on encampments and highlighted the need for all levels of government to work together to offer people shelter as quickly as possible, and recognized that encampments are a response to the crisis that we're in. But I'm wondering how that fits into the approach and how we balance the need for encampments given the crisis that we're facing versus the disruption that they're causing to residents, such as we've heard from in the delegations.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair. The way we currently handle encampments is through a compassionate approach in Ottawa. So what we really do focus on is initially providing those services and supports, trying to link them into shelter space. The city's done an exceptional job at continuing to maintain adequate shelter space for anyone wishing to come inside. And what was really underscored, as you mentioned, the federal advocate's position paper on encampments, what that has done has also been underscored by a legal opinion that was provided by our city legal team on what our requirement as a city is to be able to support people in encampments. So really what we have to do is we have to be taking a supportive approach before we take an enforcement one. And that was, again, supported by multiple Superior Court decisions that, again, made sure that we have to go in with that supportive approach first. What I will say, in hearing those delegations, these are heartbreaking stories to hear. I fully recognize that this is also affecting residents who aren't unsheltered. One of the really important things I want to underscore about some of the challenges we face with our response is we're up to 509 people who are unsheltered in our community. This number has grown from 60 in total in 2020. So we're just seeing a massive increase in the need of our community due to affordable housing. Ottawa has actually done an exceptional job compared to other municipalities on dealing with encampments in terms of that supportive approach. Last year, close to 50% of people who were in encampments were actually housed directly into housing from the street. So I'm not saying that there isn't more that needs to be done, but Ottawa is doing well in terms of doing those direct housing pieces. And then lastly, I'll say our big challenge, as has been discussed with some of those residents previously, is around the police response. So for background, there was a RCMP officer who was murdered by someone in an encampment that he was attending by himself in 2022. And that made the city's response change to be much more focused on ensuring that we do have that police report when we're doing a dismantle of an encampment. I'd also like to provide some clarity. That is when we're taking the supportive approach for most encampments, for example, in a park. And I think the delegates really wanted to underscore things that are happening on the public right of way. Within our current unsheltered response, we do immediately allow the police to dismantle encampments that are on the public right of way. So if they're on the sidewalk, in the road, that is not something that we ask police to follow our typical engagement process where we do go out and provide the supports first. As we know, police have immense staffing challenges as well. And one of the challenges we see in terms of our response times to dismantle in our documentation and unsheltered response, we had done with partners like Bylaw Police, a 5-day response time to do the dismantle. When we have upwards of 50 encampments at any given time around the city, with police resources, I'm able to dismantle between 1 and 3 a week. So if you do the math, I am not remotely coming close to hitting that 5-day target that we've set out in our guidance. As a team, we continue to strategize and prioritize some of the ones we hear that, you know, it's a growing encampment, that there's drugs, illegal activity. Those are the ones that we work with the community to ask police to prioritize. And a big part I want to underscore as well about dismantles is typically we see the most success, and over 70% of our dismantles have actually been done voluntarily through using our outreach services, which are much cheaper than the police response, much more compassionate, to get them to move along before we actually have to take that police service enforcement approach. So generally speaking, that's what it is. Resourcing issues, again, just on the police side of things to do the dismantles. And that's why we really want to focus in on a coordinated response with Bylaw Police to prioritize what resources we do have when there's problematic encampments.
Thanks very much. Appreciate all the information. That was well presented. I didn't expect all of that information. When you mentioned there was 509 people, are those people currently unsheltered singles on the street? Can I just confirm that?
Thank you, Chair. That's correct.
And do we have adequate shelter space / transitional housing / housing available to offer all 509 of those people a space to come inside?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do. So as part of our integrated transition to housing strategy, which you'll be hearing about shortly, an update for that, we are in a good position going into the winter this year with our various strategies in place to offer everybody a space who wants to come inside. Just for your knowledge, typically we see between 60 and 70% of that group that actually come inside. The rest will continue to choose to remain outside. But again, we do have adequate capacity and backup plans should that capacity get filled.
Okay, thank you. And can I just ask you, you mentioned it several times about the role of police. I believe you said that you do the dismantles with the police and you referenced the incident, I think it happened in British Columbia in 2022. But then you said sometimes you don't have police when you're dismantling on the right of way. Can you just clarify the role that police play overall in the dismantle of an encampment?
Thank you for the question, Chair. That's a very important clarification. So there's a dismantle process that is done with the Unsheltered Task Force. This is for places like in parks, things that are just generally speaking not where encampment should be. That follows an escalation process where first we do the engagement with our outreach partners. As part of that outreach, their number one thing is to try and convince people to go to shelter. We know people don't access shelter for various reasons. Their next step is we provide a notice through bylaw explaining that you will be dismantled, and this would eventually come to the police approach. What we typically see happen is our outreach partners are not dismantling, they're rather advising those people in encampments that they will be dismantled by police, for example, tomorrow. And we have a lot of success where they're like, okay, this is imminent, I will be dismantled, that they choose voluntarily to move on before taking that police enforcement approach. The police's role in this is when people refuse to move after our supportive intervention is done, they would come in for that. They are also, again, this falls outside of the Unsheltered Task Force and the work we do, can dismantle people, for example, if you're in a roadway, on the sidewalk, that kind of thing. So that does not need to follow. Again, if you're on a sidewalk, you do not need to come to us to do that supportive intervention first. Police do have the ability outside of the Unsheltered Task Force process to dismantle those immediately.
Okay, thanks. And I would imagine if the police would have some involvement if outreach workers came across somebody held against their will, weapons, any of that as well, there would be a different element to police response.
Thank you, Chair. That's absolutely correct. And I want to underscore, Ottawa Police is a partner that sits at our planning table on this. So they are very much directly involved. Police do intervene regularly, and I want to encourage all residents, if you are worried about personal safety, guns, those kind of things, you still need to call the police. This supportive approach really underscores if people are not a harm to others, people that are harmed around them, we need to go through that supportive approach as per that Superior Court decision. Where I think it is different is where, there's a weapon, there's trafficking going on. That is still a police and a criminal intervention that needs to be taken care of. So again, police do have a role in that component of it as well.
Okay, thanks. And just one last question, then I'll let some of my colleagues speak. And I just blinked. Sorry, when we heard a lot about the concentration of encampments in certain areas of town, certainly we see them more in the Byward Market and along Weedo Street and in the public parks in those communities. Is there some sort of neighborhood assessment that is done about the impacts of encampments, or is this really sort of what will come out of the motion in terms of determining the impacts it has on residents and the risks to residents and looking at sort of a risk approach to these things, the side effects that happen that we heard about from these delegates today, such as needles, defecation, et cetera?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So really what this motion looks at doing is what is our current assessment? How do we currently approach these type of things? So like I said, we do have about a 70-page document that outlines exactly what is in our encampment strategy, how it works, how the various partners are involved. What I will say on the resourcing part of it is absolutely, we know there's a significant portion of the encampments that are in the downtown core, but I'd also like to mention that our resources are heavily in the downtown core in terms of funding. The only outreach partner that has a citywide approach is the Salvation Army Outreach Van that are doing kind of anything outside the downtown core. There are many outreach partners that are just dedicated to be around certain spaces, problematic areas, from various agencies that run services that might attract some of those challenging behaviors we heard from the delegates.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll let someone else speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Bradley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kale, for all that really helpful information. And thank you to the mover of the motion for continuing to shine the light on this issue and for all of the delegations for sharing their stories and experiences. I'm particularly interested in this motion to have that analysis of the encampment response. And a good segue at the end there is, Kale, where you mentioned that we only have one community partner right now that's addressing this citywide. In Gloucester Southgate recently, we've seen an uptick in encampments as a result of the Heron Road PDC closing. And it's been jarring for my community to see. It's not something that they've been used to seeing, but I have to commend them for their empathetic approach to these individuals and their situations. We haven't experienced any dangerous individuals, just people sleeping rough. But the response, the city has been great and partners have been great, but I definitely have noticed some gaps when servicing people who are outside of the core. Like you said, there's only one partner and, these people in encampments sometimes move around. They're not in the same places. It's difficult to get them to the services downtown where they can get the help. There's only one vehicle. And if they can't get there within 24 hours, that individual might not be there again. So we have noticed that there are some gaps in servicing and helping people who are living rough, sleeping rough outside of the downtown core. So I'm really interested in the analysis of our response and whether it's adequate in serving those who are sleeping and living rough outside of the downtown core. So I just wanted to thank the mover for bringing this motion forward.
If I may comment, Chair, I'll just mention too that as I'd mentioned, we keep seeing this increase of the number of people who are in sheltered. The city has done an excellent job at increasing our resourcing for this. So just this year, we've actually allowed Salvation Army to go to 24 hours service. We've also opened new services like Center 507. So people do have a space to go during the day and evening, 24 hours. That is not a shelter. We are trying to provide additional sheltering options. And at peak periods also, they now have 3 different vans who are going around to service the outside of the core. We're also going to be bringing an updated report to council on kind of what we're doing to deal with some of these concerns in the downtown core and our shelter response, a key component of which is making sure we're efficiently using our existing outreach resources to dispatch where it makes the most sense. So we're working very closely with a lot of partners over the last year to say, how can we better doing this, making sure that there's not gaps or overlaps in our service. and then making sure that that's done through service agreements so that we have very much a coordinated approach. I do understand hearing from the delegations as well the frustrations about being bounced around between city staff. A key component, again, of what we're doing is have that centralized intake function where the city plays that role of dispatcher with the various partners and staff based on the level of intervention needed.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if staff believe whether the public's expectations on encampment response are realistic, accurate, up to date. This is a big discussion we're having at AMO as well. Encampments are a challenge across the province. The court decisions have come out. Housing is a human basic right that trumps even removal of an encampment. Even some of the comments heard from delegates today seem to be not aligned with our current strategy. So just, do you have any comments on this matter?
Thank you, Chair. I think the Ottawa, like I had mentioned, we are doing well in terms of our response. I think some of the realities and challenges we have really is around those more challenging behaviors, and some of the stories we heard are very much on the upper end of those behaviors we've seen. As we kind of heard from Councillor Bradley just now, it's not always the people who are potentially using drugs, mental health challenges that are causing these really significant issues. Where I think we can do a lot better as a community is work to link into some of our health support services. We've been working very closely with a number of councillors on trying to get additional dollars into health and housing so that we can, one, for housing stability, but also to support people who are unsheltered. I think Ottawa is actually rather unique in that we have currently an outreach nurse that goes into encampments to try and do some of this work, which we've seen a lot of success with. However, given the numbers we're seeing, you could probably have about 4 to 10 full-time staff doing that kind of thing from the health side. The city's also been exploring new funding opportunities. Like one of the ones we got in the last 2 years was the Emergency Treatment Fund, really, again, going back to the underscoring the need of pairing these services with dedicated primary care health outreach services to support some of the needs in encampments. Just to kind of end on the reality note of what residents can expect, our big challenging point in terms of those immediate dismantles, whether it be on the right of way or even through our progressive engagement process, is around that police resourcing. For those pure health and safety reasons, we do need police to be a part of those. Just to give an example, previously we used to work with the NCC's community officers. They would do dismantles. Even they have been directed that they need to work with police. So it's kind of around the board. Police resources are the challenge here if we're looking to do those 5-day dismantle processes. So we really do on the community and social services side of things is focus on how can we leverage those supports before needing the police intervention, those, I'll call them voluntary dismantles, so that people move along, try and mitigate those community issues before they get into a much more challenging thing, needing that pure enforcement intervention.
I thank you for that. Certainly, this is not an easy challenge. I have not had large encampments in my ward. I have more sort of single or 2-person encampments. I have lots of forest and secluded areas, and the response has been very good to date. But ultimately, it's what do you need? In addition to housing, like what type of personal challenges are people experiencing that we can link them with service providers? So thank you. Madam Chair, I'm just wondering, I've heard from staff that they're not able to provide by ward stats. So I'm looking at clause 3 of the motion that says following the by ward analysis, staff will meet with the impacted ward councillors. Seems perhaps not able to be delivered. I've just scribbled wording that could be potential replacement that just simply says that following the completion of the analysis and report, a briefing be provided for committee members. So I'm just wondering, before we just debate wording, once staff have prepared the report per the motion, is it just expected to come back here? I'm sure members of this committee who may not have encampments are just as interested in your analysis and report. So what are the next steps once that report is ready?
Before you respond, I will also note, because you beat me to the punch, I was going to mention that in item 2, it specifically says across the city by ward. So if anything is also changed, once again, we'll speak to the mover, that would also have to be changed. Otherwise, you will be providing it by word. So just for clarity. So if staff wanted to, does that make sense?
Maybe, yeah.
So the wording of it means they have to do it if we approve it as is. If we change it, then it's adapted. Did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we don't unfortunately have by ward data in terms of encampment, the response. We are still living in an antiquated world as it comes to our encampment response for our digital tool. I will mention by about mid-spring, we will have a digital tool rolled out, which will be collecting by word data. It allows us to do geotagging on an app that we're going to be looking to work with all outreach providers for. So although I can't provide that data immediately, we would be able to, again, in 1 year from now, provide some level of detail. I'll also mention within that strategy, we do plan on, because we hear the need from council, we would be looking to have that data kind of posted live on dashboards in an aggregated form just to collect personal information, but that is very much where we want to go with this expanding service and having that. But again, unfortunately, cannot do that right now.
So just to revisit my question, so once you've done the analysis and the report, are you simply going to provide a staff report through this committee? What's the reporting mechanism back?
So to address item 1, which is really what the overall strategy, we had planned to do a report back to, I say a report, response to motion back to committee. In terms of item 2, we do want to meet with affected ward councillors. I think the needs, that's why we wanted to have those one-on-one meetings, because the needs may vary across the different types of councillors. As Councillor Bradley mentioned, the need might be slightly different there. Yourself, Councillor Brockington, just in terms of what you're actually seeing. So we do want to intake that in terms of the response. And as I'd mentioned, we're bringing a report to council in Q1 2026 about our updated strategy, and the intent would be to have those meetings before the end of the year, so any feedback concerns can be integrated in that updated strategy that's brought back to council in the new year.
If I could add, Chair, we would be happy to bring that summary of our analysis to committee if the wording on the motion would be amended.
I think there is a lot of value in that. I think there's a lot of interest as well. What I would suggest Councillor Brockington, is our amazing committee coordinator, is drafting something, and maybe he can circulate at the end. I would also like, when we get to that point, for the mover of the motion to weigh in on it, because she had some intentions regarding that. So what I will do is, while he finalizes kind of a potential amending, whether it's friendly or not, just to ruminate on it, I'll move to Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff for what you're doing. It's a huge responsibility, and I appreciate the progress that we are making. And obviously, there's so much more to do, and the scale, as you pointed out, was tenfold more than what it was 5 years ago. That's incredible. One of the things I've come across, and yes, there's homelessness in Bay Ward as well, is when people have dogs, then they're not going to shelters, and that's sort of one of the reasons they stay clear. And it sounds like that's being used as well in other places, and that's been a problem because they don't want to leave their dog. I don't know if we've ever approached that. It's an awkward thing, and not encouraging people to, get rid of their dogs, or but I just want to know how we deal with those situations.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, certainly one of the reasons we hear cited often is around pets. Unfortunately, within our capacity, within our shelter system, we do not have the capacity to accommodate pets. We do, under the AODA, accommodate people with designated service animals. So that is something that's possible. In terms of what actually practically happens in terms of getting people to take their pet, there's various organizations in Ottawa who work to support sheltering people's pets for various different reasons. Could be medical, could be experiencing homelessness. So our agencies do work directly with a lot of those volunteers across the community who will temporarily foster pets as our best solution. We've also continued to look at options if we get new shelter capacity, new space, working with partners, is there other options where we can accommodate pets? We've done some environmental scans around other communities. It is an ongoing concern, I'd say, across Ontario in terms of offering this, a lot of challenges with liability insurance related to accommodating pets in addition. And then I think like many communities like Ottawa, unfortunately, just with the shelter demand, we need the capacity for people at this time. So, but I will reiterate, it's certainly something we look at often, and we do have interim solutions for folks who don't want to give them up.
Thank you. And yes, obviously people are the priority. As you know, I have transitional housing for families in my ward, as well as a homeless shelter for women, which is at capacity. And so the need is great, despite the fact that we have a bigger facility. I appreciate the comments about Salvation Army being working with outside the core, because that's something that we've called upon, because we've had situations where people have asked to check on people that are homeless in our community. We have been asking for support through Ottawa Community Housing and Ottawa Public Health for supportive housing. It is something that's necessary, especially when you're talking about people with complex needs, and that appears to be often the situation for homeless persons. And I don't know if there's any progress on that, but I know you would tell us, but you know, if you can elaborate on that, because we certainly need those dollars to help those people.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. One of the things we're actually looking at doing as well is having a subgroup of our housing and homelessness leadership table, specifically looking at health and housing, so we can take on these various projects that really we need to be linking health and housing dollars. In terms of the two major projects, we've been looking for funding. The first is a Healthy at Home project, where really it looks at going into, at least as the beginning of the pilot, some high needs Ottawa community housing buildings to do direct health primary care supports in those buildings, just to prevent housing loss. That's a really key place where we want to see those health interventions, is for housing loss prevention, ensuring that those behaviors that can cause problems for all of the other surrounding tenants can be addressed early from that health lens. The other thing we're looking at doing, as you know from the supportive housing audit, which was presented, we really need that additional health funding to do new projects. Happily, the City of Ottawa has actually the last couple of years exceeded our supporting housing targets in terms of the number of builds. We do need to have that pairing with the health supports to serve those high need clients. A couple of really interesting opportunities we have come up. The Matthew Perry House project that Ottawa Salis is doing, one of our partners, is a really exciting kind of innovative model to kind of have tiered supportive housing as people move through different levels of needs. And as part of that supportive housing audit, we're also going to be striking a working group of community members, hospitals, that kind of thing, to look at how do we flow people through the system so that they are sitting in the type of housing that meets their needs. For example, if people no longer need intensive supportive house, what's the process to get them into a less supportive level of building? So again, as part of that 10-year plan update and that working group for supportive housing, we are looking at expanding and having a direct plan of what is our funding needs for this.
Thank you. And you've made the point that people are losing their housing, and that's why they end up homelessness in a homeless situation. And that's, if we can do preventative, that's going to hopefully stop the growth that we're seeing. Thank you very much for all you're doing. Thank you to your team.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair, and I wanted to echo the words of Councillor Kavanaugh in terms of thanks for the work that you're doing. Encampments really affect all areas of the city, including Rideau Rockcliffe Ward. And I know that since the pandemic, we've seen a marked increase in encampments across the city, but especially in Rideau Rockcliffe Ward. And over those years, I've been working very directly with your team of